This is the Fifth Estate Winning Headlines, your media police post. In this segment, we summarize some of the headlines that you might have missed this morning. But we also take a look at the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Today is the 18th of August 2020 and I am 2J.
I am JM.
And I am GK. In case you missed the headlines, here they are. In the Daily Nation, Day of Terror. In the Standard, Senate under siege. And in the Star, Western scandal. NLC backs RUTO in hotel dispute. Let us begin with the Day of Terror.
Yes.
And so we know that there's been issues or dramas at the Senate. They were supposed to come and pass this thing, and it all went to hell in a handbasket. So basically, three senators, Cleophas Malala, Christopher Langat, and Steve Lelegwe of Samburu, were basically stopped from coming back into Nairobi to have their vote. So in the furor that went on, they were arrested, some were charged, some were just held and then released later on today. But the idea was, or whoever's planning it was to stop the three from joining Team Kenya, which is now opposing the government the government-backed
Sounds like
formula.
a cheap football team.
Yeah, Team Kenya. But interestingly, Senate then came together and said, listen, we are adjourning or we're not going to pass anything until those three have been released.
Yes.
Now, my question is this the deep state at work, or is this a crisis of leadership within the Senate? What's going on?
You know, as you've said, GK, and this is what the Standard said last week, that this is a crisis of leadership.
Yeah.
And that's what the failure here is about. The buck stops with Irungu Kangata, the Jubilee Party whip. And the rebellion of senators on this issue is largely due to his inexperience in lobbying. He has failed to be imaginative in building consensus.
Yeah.
So Kangata is like Giuseppe Garibaldi, the one-time dictator of Italy and one of modern Italy's founding fathers during the 19th century, who was described as having the heart of a lion but the brain of an ox. So yes, he demonstrates a lot of enthusiasm, but his methods are ineffective. Whatever he's trying to do, trying to build that consensus isn't working. And the other is Samuel Pogishio, leader of the majority party in the Senate. He's been totally inconspicuous during this debate. And here what we see is the government attempting to build consensus through dominance, not through dialogue. But to build it through dominance, you need people with mastery, you need expert negotiators. You also need people who are respected amongst their peers. And I have a feeling that Irungu in particular does not command much respect in the House.
That is quite true. But one thing I do have to applaud the senators for is really milking this 15 minutes of fame that they've been going through. I think Parliament is always the star. And right now, I don't think we've ever spoken about Senate so much. I'm getting quite fatigued. But I think just going back to whoever is orchestrating this entire thing, I think I must respectfully critique them. I think that there's been no elegance, no finesse about the whole thing. I think we know at the end of the day, the state will get what it wants to get. But I think there needs to be some level of secrecy behind it all. I think if we're going to keep talking about the deep state, there needs to be some secrecy, some deepness about it. And I think there needs to be a little bit, maybe take a step back, find that deepness and maintain that. But I think what's interesting is if we talk about this boogeyman, that the object of aggression that RUTO has been trying to throw at the people. First it was the hustlers. He says the hustlers are this big group of people. And then, I guess that didn't work so much. And then now he's talking about the deep state as this big boogeyman. I don't know.
You don't know?
I don't know
well,
how true that is.
Well, the prince in Machiavelli teaches us something. It's easy to convince people of something, but hard to keep them convinced. So when they stop believing in you, you must be in a position to force them to believe. Now, the thing is, this formula was supposed to be debated, negotiated, so that everyone has some outcome that fits for them. Just outrightly saying no to it doesn't really work, right? So we're hoping that the 12-member committee that's being set up, that will sit next Tuesday, will hopefully come to some middle ground so that we can move the issue forward. So RAILA came out in a statement today and said it was absolutely unnecessary to turn the debate among counties into a contest between losers and gainers, pastoralists and agriculturalists, regions and tribes. And so people have to be careful of what you're being misdirected into just for politics' sake. So we have a 3-part criteria that we will use to break down the headlines. We'll ask ourselves, is it topical or speculative? Is it repetitive or groundbreaking? And is it thoughtful or just plain lazy?
Yes.
We had their Daily Nation Day of Terror, and we have the Standard Senate under siege, which I quite like because it is a Senate under siege. And then we have the Star. Now the Star has taken a completely different tangent.
Yes.
We find ourselves with the National Land Commission and Western Hotel.
I think we're beginning to see who the owners of the Star might be. The Star is telling us that the NLC argues that the KCAA simply wanted to turn a blind eye to RUTO's rights as a bona fide purchaser. So I think if we've been following this story, there was some back and forth about whether the owner of Western should pay outright for the land or give some compensation back, and it keeps going back and forth. But the NCL argues that that in its legal strategy, that RUTO should just pay for the land as a bona fide purchaser. It also says that the NLC did not have the jurisdiction to preside over the original complaint on the restitution of the land. And I think that kind of brings up an interesting question. What standing does the NLC have? I think here they talk about the dispute about this conversation having expired. So I think we really need to take a closer look into who the NLC is really, playing for. Who?
I guess we can already guess.
Yeah, I guess we can guess. Yeah.
On that note, can I toss us down?
Oh yes, please. Yeah.
For having owners, that leaves us with the Day of Terror and the Standard.
Yes, I think we go with
the Standard.
The Standard.
There you have it. Standard gives us our winning headline onto the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country, where we also have a 3-part criteria. We ask ourselves, is it humorous or dry? Is it satirical or pessimistic? And is it effective or just plain lazy? Shall we begin with the Standard, please?
Yes. So here we have a cartoon depicting Raila Odinga in one frame saying, "Deep State rigged me out." In the second frame, RUTO says, "Deep State is planning to rig me out." And then we have Wanjiko in a third frame telling Raila and RUTO, "Gentlemen, the only way to sort out this issue is to have free, fair, transparent and verifiable elections." And last week RUTO came out saying that the deep state is frustrating him. But then on Friday last week again, Raila said, "You're part of the deep state. You have half incumbency, so you can't tell us that if deep state is frustrating, you're attacking yourself." No, that's not how it works. And that's what that's about. It's humorous.
Yeah.
Is it? I thought it was so dry.
So dry.
I don't. Your commentary, your commentary is good. Gado.
Yeah, your commentary is more interesting than the cartoon itself.
Can we toss it?
I think we toss it, really.
Okay.
Okay, let's move to the Daily Nation, where we have 2 crocodiles, and in the mouths of the 2 crocodiles, on one side we have a caricature of James Orengo and Olekina Ledama. And then on the other side in the mouth, we have Murkomen, Sakaja, Samson Chergey, Kithuri Kindike. And then the caption says, "When the government is done eating its own, guess who will be next on the menu? Who will be on the menu next?"
Yeah. I don't understand the cartoon.
I also don't. Is it coming from what James Orengo had always said about the system eating its own?
And if so, who's next then? The people?
Just don't ever go against the system, period.
Yeah,
then you won't ever be in a crocodile's mouth.
That's the lesson here.
Yeah.
Unless you're prepared to have a tough fight.
We will park it for now. In the Star, what do we have?
In the Star, we have the Senate building and Parliament next to it, and Senate is being clamped, and it is being clamped by the revenue bill. And the caption says, "The pressure mounts."
Indeed it does.
Yeah, it
Indeed,
does.
this will be the 10th time that they will be trying to meet, so
oh gosh,
let's hope that they pass it.
But I think what's very interesting is Putin always said, or rather he's believed to have said, that to my friends everything, and to my enemies the law. And so I think what would be very interesting is that I want to know what, under what grounds these 3 senators were arrested. Because I think if we're going to use the law against them, it's also interesting to justify and validate it.
Let it be clever. Okay, so who do we give our winning cartoon? I like the Star.
I like the Star as well.
So do I.
Yeah.
All right, there you have it. The Star gives us our winning cartoon. And now for our final thought, but before we get there, please remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel.
And now our final thought. Today is inspired by the stories and secrecy around the Boxer Rebellion and the Red Lanterns. So during the 19th century, Chinese pride and the estate and wealth surrounding the last imperial dynasty of China, they were known as the Qing dynasty, was severely put to the test. So for 60 years, China was forced to import opium in return for cheap exportation of Chinese goods. Major European powers were compelling the reluctant Chinese empire to start trading with them. So there was very little that the Chinese government could do, and there was very little that they actually wanted from the West. But at that time, there was a high demand for opium from Chinese citizens. And on top of that, the Chinese were forced to promote Christianity in its territories, and they were forced to sign a long series of unequal treaties that granted foreign powers and their commercial counterparts some privileges, extraterritorial rights, and immunity. And by the end of the 19th century, the balance of power with this lucrative trade between China and Western merchants was almost entirely in the West's favor. And so as this Western influence began to grow, anti-European secret societies began to form in retaliation. And amongst the most violent and popular was one called the Yi Ho Chuan, mind my pronunciation, in English loosely translated to the righteous and harmonious fists. And so Christian missionaries were the first to refer to them as boxers because they were young, well-trained, athletic men. And it was also because of the martial arts that they practiced. And so that's how the Boxer Rebellion got its name. And so it was a secret society uprising against foreigners that occurred in China and was initiated by peasants, but eventually the government had to back them because of pressure. And so it targeted foreigners first and foremost, and Western missionaries in particular. But it also targeted Chinese who had converted to Christianity because they were drawing a lot of anger for flouting traditional Chinese ceremonies and family relations. And so the Boxers, this secret society, actually dates back to the 1700s. And there's a lot of myth and some legend surrounding it. I think that's where much of the interest came. But they believed that through training, diet, martial arts, and prayer, they could develop special skills, some of them including flying. And so they thought that by doing all of these things, they would be immune to Western techniques like bullets. It's very strange, but bear with us. So there was this growing fear that the Chinese would be they would end up becoming servants to the West. And so they started preaching these anti-Western beliefs. And they said that anything that was Western was evil, and they practiced these martial arts to protect themselves. So they said that all foreigners were first-class devils, that Chinese who converted to Christianity were second-class devils, and those who worked for foreigners were third-class devils. And that's kind of how they determined who they were going to attack. But one interesting thing about their ideology was that they forbade contact with women. And this is because their discipline was very strict. It didn't allow sexual contact with women or even looking at women, because they believed that the yin, how you have yin and yang, they believed that the yin in women, their aura, would be distracting and would undo the things that they had been doing to protect themselves. Very strange and interesting. I don't know how much of it is actually true.
It is actually true. So they're called the Red Lanterns because it was these teenage girls, so they were all under the age of 18, and they would wear these red capes and carry these red fans and have lots of red and handkerchiefs around, And so they were the female counterparts to the Boxers, and their job was to sort of propagate this anti-foreign, anti-Christian sentiment, and they would go around burning things. But beyond burning things, they would have these slogans. And so at midnight, they would congregate and they would go around the streets and they would tell anyone who would listen, women don't cut your hair, cut off your foreign devils' heads, women do not bind your feet, strike away the foreign devils' smiles. And the criteria to join the Red Lanterns was A, like you said, not sexually active and not menstruating, because they believed that the Boxer's success could not be contaminated with women's pollution. So if you were menstruating, you were polluted in that sense. And this led to restriction on the activities of everyday women. So they couldn't go out and do their laundry, to the marketplace, and do anything if you were if you were menstruating, which is interesting if it was actually happening. But these Red Lanterns were known to have celestial powers. They apparently could fly up into the air, throw daggers down into people and chop their heads off. There was a lot of mystery and aura surrounding these women and how agile they were. I don't believe they could fly, but anyway, or have daggers that they would throw. And anyway, it was very interesting. and they could pinpoint enemies' locations, so they were useful in that way. So aside from the red lanterns, there was also the blue and black, which was made up of widows and who were too old to participate but helped out in other ways. And then there was an interesting brigade, the 4th Brigade, the Cooking Pan Lantern Brigade. And they were armed with magic saucepans that never went empty, and they fed the 60,000 strong Boxer army. But I think, despite legend, I think it's just the ability to feed the army that was what was crucial in this, But there are reports that they were being fed with mercury sulfide, and that's why the Red Lanterns would act as crazy as they did. Legend has it. But all this was underpinned by a lady called the Yellow Lotus, and she's the one who would train these people. And for a long time, many years later, national government would still sort of discredit the fact that it was her beyond the arson, beyond the attacks, beyond, they didn't want to give the credit to a woman. And she did all this because she loved her husband, and they had killed her husband.
Wow.
So can you imagine starting a whole movement?
Because of love.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Love is a powerful force.
Yeah.
I want to just take us down a path of history, and I want to ask, why is misogyny so deep-seated?
Tell us.
And I want to give you a historical perspective from Women in Power, a Manifesto. This is a book by Mary Beard. And so here's a brief history of our flawed ideas, and it dates back to the Greeks. And the Greeks, by the way, are still ruling this world through their ideas. If you scratch below the surface, you'll see that the classical foundations underlying many of today's cultural institutions, presumptions, and notions of issues such as leadership, such as slavery, such as democracy, indeed, such as the divide between men and women, it dates back to the ideas of the Greeks. And so for the Greeks, the idea of women successfully wielding power was absolutely ridiculous. They are the ones who really concretized the idea that a woman's role in society was exclusively to produce new citizens for the nation. And a good illustration to demonstrate their view towards women is to examine the female characters in their plays. And they were big in terms of putting on theater and shows and writing stories. And although they were cast as powerful women, their traits are overwhelmingly negative. So women were characterized as monstrous hybrids, assuming male qualities and usurping the power typically held by men. Most women who occupied positions of power in those stories always ended in disaster, justifying, therefore, their exclusion from power, their exclusion from the sphere of leadership in society. And a case in point that the author gives is that of Agamemnon from 458 BC. This play was set during the Trojan War, where King Agamemnon heads off to fight, leaving his wife, Clytemnestra, behind as the ruler. However, putting a woman in charge turns out doesn't go so well. So upon Agamemnon's return, his wife murders him while in the bath, and the natural patriarchal order only restores when the children overthrow her and murder her.
Oh my goodness.
A tragic story.
Yes.
And lastly, even the warrior goddess Athena, after whom the city of Athens in Greece is named, has often been taken as a positive example of a powerful female figure. But her depiction is problematic because soldiering or being in the army was exclusively for men in Greek culture. And so Athena, is portrayed, yes, as a woman, but with very male-like qualities. Additionally, she was a virgin, and that's how she was cast, meaning that she was very distinct from the role usually associated with the ordinary woman in society. In some, therefore, she was hardly a woman at all. And so a lot of these ideas, they still permeate our thinking about how society ought to be structured, about the social constructions that we have put upon ourselves on the male and female divide.
Interesting.
And we need to re-examine them.
Oh, yes, we do.
I'm happy to hear that coming from you. Yeah, that's great. From a man, it's great. Yeah.
So I'll leave you with a quote by Leela Khalid, and she says, "I have learned that a woman can be a fighter, a freedom fighter, a political activist, and that she can fall in love and be loved. She can be married, have children, be a mother. Therefore, revolution must mean life also. every aspect of life. So women can take up all those roles and more. On a day where we had a winning headline from The Standard, Senate under siege, and a winning cartoon from The Star, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, but also find us on TV. We're on GoTV, Prime Vita, and Star Times. Have a lovely